Welcome back. Let's apply this new concept of having an exponent of 0. Okay, look at my expression. It says x to the 0. Well, we all know that expression doesn't make sense. The job of an exponent is to tell you how many times to write that base. So when I look at this, I say, wait a minute. How can I write base x 0 times? I can't. So ladies and gentlemen, you have to memorize a fact. Every time you see a base with a 0 exponent, its answer is always understood to be the number 1. And again, why is that? Because the only way to ever even get an exponent of 0 would have been physically to divide the same amount. For example, if I took x and I divided it by x, well, I know the exponents here is 1, and I know the exponents here is 1, and I know when I divide, I'm supposed to subtract. That would get me x to the 0. So that's where a 0 exponent even comes from. It comes from the fact that you had to divide the same term by itself. But we know from 3rd grade math, arithmetic, when you divide something by itself, the answer is always 1. Therefore, in algebra, you will never write x to the 0 in an answer, because that's not considered simplified. Anytime you have a base with a 0 exponent, you must replace it, substitute it with the number 1. Okay, let's try another expression. Here is 9x to the 0. So I see a 0 exponent. Who owns it? Does that 0 belong to the 9? Does that 0 belong to the x, or does it belong to both? Well, we've discussed this already. There is no parentheses in this expression. So that means that 0 exponent belongs just to the x. So this is 9 times x to the 0. Well, I can't leave that expression. It's not simplified. The 9 would stay, and we now know x to the 0 will always get substituted, replaced with the number 1. That doesn't mean the answer is 91. This is 9 times 1. So this expression is really the number 9. But look at the 3rd expression. Doesn't it look the same as this expression? No. Now I have parentheses. So we've discussed this. Parentheses are a big deal in math. They group things together. When I have this 0 exponent outside of this parentheses, that means that 0 belongs both to the 9 and to the x. I could rewrite this as saying this is 9 to the 0 and x to the 0. That's what that means. That 0 belongs to both the number, the coefficient, and the variable. Well, we just talked about this. Any base, letter or number, with a 0 exponent is always the value 1. So 9 to the 0 is 1. I can't write 9 0 times. The answer is 1. X to the 0 is 1. These two are connected by multiplication, those two terms. So 1 times 1 is 1. So everybody see how important parentheses are. All right. Next expression. Negative x to the 0. So again, I have a 0 exponent. Who owns it? Does the 0 exponent belong just to the x, or does it also belong to this coefficient? Well, let's talk. What is the coefficient? Well, we understand that's a negative 1. If we are in parentheses, that means that 0 exponent belongs to both the coefficient and the variable. So we could write this as negative 1 to the 0, and we could write it as x to the 0, because that's what you're telling me. If I'm in parentheses, both of these terms get that exponent of 0. Any base with a 0 exponent is what answer? 1. So this becomes a 1. This term becomes a 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Now, a lot of you could just look at this and do both of these expressions in your brain. You could say to yourself, okay, because I have parentheses, the whole base, 9x, belongs to the 0. If the whole term belongs to the 0 exponent, the whole term is 1. I have parentheses. If the whole term is in parentheses, that means the whole term belongs to the 0 exponent. That means the whole value is 1. Look at our last expression. Negative x to the 0. Here's the one we all get wrong because we do not pay attention. Do you see parentheses now? No. So this 0 only belongs to the x. It has nothing to do with that negative. That negative is a coefficient of -1. I will bring it down. That 0 does not belong to it. It's not in parentheses. So I'll bring my -1 down. And what is x to the 0? That's 1. Well, what's -1 times 1? -1. Again, I'm always following, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We do not multiply first and then do an exponent. According to please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we do the exponent part first and then we multiply. So the moral of the story is any base with a 0 exponent, you cannot leave the 0 exponent in the answer. You have to substitute it with a 1. Pay close attention to who owns the 0 exponent. All right, we still got more division coming your way. See you in the next video.